Welcome to Gaming Backlog, and today, let's talk about visual novels and yes, visual novels, you heard me! Not just visual novels, but story-rich games. It's probably not the first kind of game that comes to mind when it comes to gamers showcasing their skills. But beyond the action-packed fighting games with a bazillion fighting combos, intense Souls-like that require almost supernatural instincts, or FPS shooters that call for the utmost precision, visual novels and story-rich games require a quieter, but just as cool, skill. What does skill mean though, especially when it comes to games? How can anyone measure what it is? Skill can be defined as the ability to use one's knowledge effectively and readily in execution or performance. So basically, skill is using what you've learned or experienced to achieve certain goals or complete certain tasks. Very much integral to video games, as games are all about getting to a certain goal. Whether you're flicking and clicking on heads in an FPS, or working your butt off to memorize the perfect combo to try and defeat your best friend who just keeps annihilating you at Injustice, some level of skill is necessary to get to where we want to be in video games. Given this definition of skill, we can see that skill applies to visual novels too, from story-heavy ones to the ones where you want to hit on insanely attractive people. At first glance, it just looks like a lot of reading, but reading also means analysis. And beneath that layer is the core of the whole proverbial onion of reading, the meta. Now, meta sounds really cool, but what does it have to do with visual novels and story-rich games? Meta means showing or suggesting an explicit awareness of itself or oneself as a member of its category, or something cleverly self-referential. When it comes to games, it can also pertain to how any player understands the gears and cogs that make the game move. In competitive games, we see this in community tier lists that showcase the level of viability of certain characters or weapons. In story-heavy games and visual novels, the meta is presented in the way the writing leads you to certain clues, the way something is animated when there's a clue nearby, and so on. If you've played enough of these visual novels or story-heavy games, you start to get a feel for what the game wants of you. You start to see the signs, the meta, that points you in the right direction. These keen observations power the decision-making skills necessary to lead you toward the love interest you always wanted to go for, towards the ending you want to get in the game, and also towards landing you the verdict you need. When players understand how the game operates and how it wants you to discover new things, these become the key pathways for them to beat the game. Let's look at Phoenix Wright, or to be honest, all of the Ace Attorney games. The character portraits in the game are not just a staple to the Ace Attorney art style and general kookiness. It was also a way to tell the players exactly what was right under their noses. The animations and facial expressions can tell you a lot about what part of their testimony is fishy. Apollo Justice even takes this more explicitly by making it part of the gameplay. These sorts of clues can be found by understanding how the games want you to learn things. The fixed animations in the game can show what the character is thinking, whether in the most obvious and extra expression of emotion or in the most subtle way. When a character deviates from the usual set of expressions or animations, or if they react in a way that gives off the signals that they're hiding something. Like when someone starts sweating bullets when they're about to be found out. Even something as simple as getting shown the time and date of a place you traveled to shows something there has changed, and that it's time to start questioning people again or looking around the scene for what else is there to uncover. The more you play, the more you also develop a sort of sixth sense for things that you should take note of. Like if the game mentions that someone is left-handed or something like that. The neurons activate and you're like, make a mental note of that. Because you just know that this will be an important thing during the cross-examination, because why would they mention that if it's not important to something, somewhere, or someone? There is no Pepe Silva and there's no Carol from HR! The Walking Dead is a story-rich game that makes it very clear that your choices in very important situations will carry weight as you continue your journey as Lee Everett. And we all learned that the moment we saw blank, we'll remember that. We're used to seeing zombie media as action-packed and fast-paced. The goal is to survive and never look back. So when the game mechanics-wise takes you by the reins, it makes you realize that you're not just there to shoot your way out. Choices were so important to Telltale's game that there were polls at the end of each episode showing what other players decided to do, and the results can get really divided at times. But that in itself helps players inform their future choices. When we first played the series, we didn't know what we were in for. But in later parts of the series, we made extra sure we paid attention to the little details because someone's life could be on the line. So in a way, Telltale's The Walking Dead subverts the more obvious genre and shows through its gameplay that choice and telling a good story are what should drive the way the players approach the game. Also, if you want to hear us gush more about The Walking Dead, why not watch our Gaming Backlog episode? Paranormasight, another story-heavy visual novel-type game, at one point tells you that you can lower the voice volume if there are voices that you don't want to hear. If you're a veteran of these visual novel-type games, you just tell yourself that's just not a throwaway statement. Plus, there's no voice acting in the game at all, so that must mean something outside of what we usually think is out there and yet to be uncovered in the context. The meta is something that really can push itself outside of the box and use volume, a typical setting option for games that we don't really pay attention to, as part of the narrative and gameplay. Quite ingenious, if I may say. Versus their adrenaline-pumping counterparts, visual novels and story-rich games don't always earn praise for the kind of skill it takes to navigate them. It's nothing so tangible as focus firing on the big bad of the game or getting them caught in an inescapable juggle. But these games ask you to go slow and really dig deep, really try to understand what it's trying to say to you. As much as heavy mechanical skill games need many hours of playing the game itself or even slaving away using an aim trainer, these story-heavy games also need a lot of hours of playing other similar games for you to understand the patterns that these games share. Playing these games gives you the experience that allows you to be more observant of what's being asked of you as a player, and that in itself is quite the skill. And while I'm sure I'll still enjoy screaming at my PC, trying desperately to defeat the next Elden Ring boss that's in my way, something about stepping back, exercising your brain to think big, to think outside the box, to reach an end goal, makes all the quieter victories worth it. So yeah, don't sleep on them. But for now, why not tell us in the comments below about your favorite visual novels or story-rich games? And don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel to see more on all things gaming. This has been Bina, and we'll see you in the next one.